Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into something pretty fascinating. Ethical hacking. These are the white knights of the internet, basically.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. They're essentially security experts who get paid to, well, legally break into computer systems.
Legally break in. Sounds a bit counterintuitive.
It does, but the key is permission. They have explicit authorization to test an organization's defenses, find the weak spots.
Okay. So they're trying to find holes before the actual criminals, the malicious hackers, stumble upon them.
Exactly. It's all about strengthening security from the inside out, thinking like an attacker, but, for good.
We've gathered quite a bit of info on this, and our mission today really is for you to get a solid handle on what ethical hacking is, why it's, frankly, essential now, and how relevant it is given all the cyber threats flying around. Consider this your shortcut to being clued in.
Right. So maybe we should start with the basics. What exactly does an ethical hacker, or a white hat, as they're often called, do day to day?
Good question. Well, fundamentally, they are cybersecurity specialists. Organizations hire them specifically to hunt for vulnerabilities.
Like weak points in their network, or maybe their software?
Precisely. Before the black hats, the malicious ones find and exploit them. It's kind of like hiring a locksmith to test your own doors and windows.
To see if they can get in so you know where to upgrade the locks? Makes sense.
And the methods they use, they actually mimic what real cybercriminals do, don't they?
They absolutely have to. Otherwise, the test wouldn't be realistic. They use the same tools, the same techniques.
So things like penetration testing.
Yeah, penetration testing, actively trying to breach security controls. Also, vulnerability assessments, which is more about scanning systems to identify potential weaknesses.
Like finding an unlocked window, maybe?
Yeah.
Versus actively trying to pick the lock.
Sort of, yeah. And they also do risk analysis, figuring out how bad it would be if a certain vulnerability was exploited, what data could be lost, what systems could go down, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, this brings up that crucial difference you mentioned earlier. White hats versus black hats.
Right. The absolute core distinction here is intent and legality.
White hats have permission, they're authorized. Their goal is constructive, improved security, and it's all legal.
Whereas black hats, well, they're the opposite. They're acting illegally, often trying to steal data, cause damage, maybe demand a ransom. Their intent is malicious.
And there's that middle ground too, the gray hats.
Yeah, yes, gray hats. They're tricky. They might hack into a system without permission, maybe to expose a flaw publicly.
So not necessarily trying to cause harm, but still acting illegally.
Exactly. No authorization means it's illegal, and ethically, it's definitely questionable. They operate in a bit of a murky area.
Got it. So we know what they do and the different types.
Sure.
Let's talk about why this is so important now. Why does ethical hacking matter so much?
Well, the big one is proactive security. Finding and fixing weaknesses before an attack happens. It's prevention.
Instead of waiting for a disaster.
Precisely. We saw data showing ransomware attacks are just soaring. Being proactive is just, well, critical. You can't afford not to be.
It really is like preventative medicine for a company's digital health.
That's a great analogy.
Wow.
And then there's compliance. Many industries have strict rules, think healthcare with IHAPA, or finance with PCI DSS, even GDPR for data privacy.
Right, those regulations demand strong security.
They do. And ethical hacking, specifically penetration testing, is often required to prove you meet those standards. It helps tick those compliance boxes.
I bet it saves money in the long run, too. Dealing with a breach must be incredibly expensive.
Oh, absolutely. The cost of a cyber attack, fines, lawsuits, fixing the systems, lost business, damage to your reputation. It's astronomical compared to investing in preventative security like ethical hacking.
That reputation point is interesting, too. People trust companies that look after their data.
It builds enormous trust. Knowing a company takes security seriously enough to actively test itself, that's a huge plus for customers and partners.
So really, with cybercrime constantly evolving, these ethical hackers are kind of on the front lines, aren't they?
They really are. A first line of defense. And the demand for them is just exploding.
Yeah, I saw a prediction, something like 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs globally expected soon.
That's the figure. It shows a massive need for these skills. It's a huge growing field and a really viable career path for many.
So wrapping this up, it's clear ethical hacking isn't just some tech jargon. It's really fundamental to keeping our digital world safe.
Absolutely. They are, like you said earlier, guardians of this digital realm we all live in now.
It definitely makes you think.
Which leads to a final thought for you listening. As these cyber threats keep getting more sophisticated, And technology gets woven even deeper into our lives. What other, maybe unexpected ways might we need to defend ourselves in the future? Something to ponder.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we're doing a deep dive into ethical hacking.
Mm-hmm.
We've got some really interesting source material that lays out the process step by step.
Yeah, it's quite systematic.
Our mission, really, is to get a handle on how these pros find security weaknesses,
Hmm.
sort of peek behind the curtain,
Yes.
from the offensive perspective.
Exactly. And understanding that methodology, well, it's invaluable. Gives you real insight into how vulnerabilities are found and ultimately how to protect systems better.
Okay, let's dive in. First up is reconnaissance. Sounds very cloak and dagger. What's that about?
It's basically digital intelligence gathering. Think of it like scouting.
Okay,
The sources mention network mapping, figuring out the target's digital layout,
right.
right? And OS fingerprinting, identifying the operating systems.
So what computers are they running?
Precisely. It's like a detective surveying the scene, yeah.
Yeah.
Noting potential entry points before making any direct contact. They're looking for publicly available clues. What kind of info really jumps out there?
It's just amazing how much you can learn from the outside before you even, touch anything.
It really is.
So after that initial look around, come scanning, what's happening then?
Okay, yeah, scanning is when they start actively probing the target. Gently, usually.
Probing.
Yeah, the source mentions tools like Nmap. Nessus is another one. Think of them less like just ringing doorbells and more like, well, sending out signals to see which doors, which ports are open.
Ports meaning.
Digital entry points for services. They check what services, like applications, might be running and listening behind those ports. An open port means something's active there.
And potentially vulnerable.
Potentially, yes. It's an indication that there's something to investigate further.
Ah, okay. So finding an open port is kind of like finding an unlocked window, maybe. A
Mm.
possible way in.
That's a pretty good analogy, yeah. It warrants a closer look.
Yeah.
And that naturally leads to the next stage, gaining access.
Right, this is where the actual hacking part comes in.
This is where they try to exploit the vulnerabilities found during scanning.
Okay, the source talks about things like SQL injection, buffer overflows. Sounds complex. Can you break those down a bit?
Sure. So SQL injection, crudely put, is like tricking a website's database into running commands it shouldn't by feeding it specially crafted input, finding a flaw in how it handles data, a buffer overflow. Imagine trying to pour too much water into a small cup. It spills over, right? Here, you're sending too much data to a program's temporary storage, the buffer.
Okay.
And that overflow can sometimes overwrite important instructions or memory, potentially letting an attacker take control. It's about exploiting, well, errors or oversights in the code.
Fascinating how often it seems to come down to small programming mistakes.
It often does. Small cracks can lead to big problems.
So once they've found that crack and gotten inside, the next step is maintaining access. Why not just report it then?
Good question. Sometimes they need persistent access to really understand the extent of the vulnerability or to see how deep an attacker could potentially go, ethically, of course. The source mentions backdoors and rootkits for this. A backdoor is like creating a hidden entry point for later. Undetected, ideally.
Like leaving a key under the mat.
Sort of, but much stealthier. And a rootkit, well, that's more powerful. It's a set of tools to gain deep administrative control, often hiding its own presence. Think ultimate hidden control.
Wow. So they're not just popping in. They might set up a hidden base camp, essentially.
In a controlled, authorized way, yes, for thorough analysis. But then comes a crucial step for any hacker, ethical or otherwise, covering tracks.
Makes sense. You don't want to leave obvious signs. The source mentions log manipulation, clearing event logs.
Exactly. Systems keep records, logs of almost everything that happens, who logged in, what files were accessed, etc.
Digital footprints.
Precisely. So covering tracks involves altering or deleting those logs to make it harder to see what happened, erasing the footprints.
Is that actually easy to do effectively?
It varies, depends on the system and the attacker's skill. Sophisticated security monitoring can often still detect anomalies or the tampering itself, but it's definitely part of the attacker playbook.
Okay. And then the final, and maybe most important part for ethical hacking, is reporting.
Absolutely vital. This is the whole point. The source notes the outcome is a detailed report.
Not just, hey, I got in.
No, it's a professional analysis. It details the vulnerabilities found, how they were exploited, the potential impact, and crucially, provides specific, actionable recommendations for fixing those weaknesses.
So the goal isn't destruction, it's constructive feedback.
Exactly. It's about improving security by showing the organization where they're vulnerable based on simulating a real attack.
This whole systematic process, reconnaissance, scanning, gaining access, maintaining it, covering tracks, and finally reporting,
Yeah,
it really shows how methodical it is.
it absolutely is. It's a structured approach designed to mimic real threats in a safe way to ultimately strengthen defenses. It underlines how proactive good cybersecurity needs to be.
Definitely. Really makes you think. Considering all those stages, what common security practices strike you as most critical for blocking each step? What does this constant battle tell us about where cybersecurity is heading? Some real food for thought there. Thanks for walking us through this deep dive.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're digging into something really vital and pretty fascinating in our digital world, ethical hacking.
It's a great topic. Definitely crucial.
Yeah, think of it like hiring someone to try and pick your house locks.
Uh-huh.
Not to steal anything, obviously, but, to show you where the weak points are so you can fix them.
Exactly. Make your home more secure. Same idea, but for computers and networks.
These are the white hats, right? The good guys. And our mission today is just to pull out the key insights, get you up to speed on what they actually do and, well, why it really matters.
Absolutely. And it's not just about, clever technical tricks. It's really a fundamental security mindset.
How so?
It's about being proactive, understanding how the attackers think, how they might operate, so you can build better defenses against them.
Okay, so let's jump right in then. What is ethical hacking in practical terms?
Well, put simply, ethical hacking means you're legally and with very clear, explicit permission trying to penetrate computer systems and networks.
That permission bit sounds crucial.
Oh, it's everything. That's the absolute line between ethical hacking and, well, illegal hacking. The goal here isn't malicious at all.
Right.
It's all about finding security holes, vulnerabilities, before someone with bad intentions does.
So you're not just scanning for problems. You're actually trying to break in with permission, of course, to see if you can.
Precisely, yeah. And that takes different forms. Penetration testing is a big one. That's where ethical hackers actively try to exploit the weaknesses they find.
Okay.
Then there are vulnerability assessments, which are maybe a bit broader.
Mm-hmm.
They identify potential flaws that could be exploited down the line.
So potential problems versus actually trying the exploit.
Kind of. And then you've got risk analysis, too, which helps companies understand, what's the potential damage if someone did successfully exploit that vulnerability.
Yeah.
It all adds up to a much more robust, proactive security stance.
Right. Now, we hear these terms, white hats, who we've established are the good guys, but then there are black hats and even gray hats. What's the actual difference there?
So, white hats, as we said, they're the ethical hackers. They operate totally legally, always with permission, and their goal is genuinely to improve security.
Okay.
Black hats, they're the malicious ones, the criminals, operating illegally, trying to steal data, cause chaos, make money illicitly, whatever.
Standard movie hacker, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. The stereotype often fits.
And then these gray hats. Sounds murky.
It really is. Gray hat hackers. These are folks who might find a vulnerability and break into a system, but they do it without asking permission first.
Okay, but they're not trying to wreck things.
Generally, no.
Yeah.
Unlike black hats, their intent usually isn't malicious. They might just, poke around and then tell the company, hey, you've got this flaw.
So kind of like a vigilante?
Maybe, but here's the really critical point.
Mm-hmm.
Even if their intentions aren't bad, what they did is still illegal because they didn't have that authorization. That's the sharp line separating them from white hats.
Got it. That distinction's super important. Okay, so shifting gears a bit. Why is ethical hacking so critical right now? Why should, businesses or even us as individuals really care?
Well, the absolute core reason is prevention. Proactively finding and fixing these vulnerabilities. It helps organizations avoid incredibly costly data breaches.
Ah, the costs, yeah.
Think about it, recovering lost data, legal fees, potential regulatory fines, GDPR, HIPAA, PCI DSS. Those fines could be massive. Ethical hacking helps prevent all that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the money, right? A major breach can seriously tank a company's reputation.
Exactly. Trust is just paramount today.
Yep.
If your customers think your systems are leaky, that you can't protect their data, they're going to go elsewhere.
For sure.
So having strong security and being able to show it's been tested by ethical hackers, that builds huge trust. Imagine like a big online store getting breached, the reputational hit. Devastating.
And it really feels like we hear about new attacks every week. Ransomware, data theft. The threats aren't going away.
They're definitely not. They're increasing. Cybercrime is, well, it's booming. unfortunately,
Yeah.
getting more sophisticated.
So ethical hackers are kind of on the front lines.
Absolutely. They're a crucial defense, constantly testing, finding the new holes that the criminals might use, helping organizations stay ahead, or at least, keep up.
Sounds like a field with a lot of demand then, career-wise.
Oh, huge demand. Cybersecurity Ventures predicted something like 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs globally by 2025. That's a lot.
Wow.
And ethical hacking is a really key skill set within that. So, yeah, definitely promising career prospects for people interested in, well, defending the digital world.
Okay, so let's say someone wants to do this. They become an ethical hacker. What does the job actually look like? What are the steps they go through?
It usually follows a kind of methodology. It often starts with reconnaissance.
Reconnaissance, like spying.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about gathering information on the target system or network, like a detective collecting clues before acting.
What kind of clues?
Things like mapping out the network structure, seeing what servers are talking to each other, even identifying the operating systems they're running. Windows, Linux, that's called OS fingerprinting. Different systems leave different digital fingerprints.
Okay, so understanding the landscape first.
Exactly. You need to know what you're dealing with. Then comes scanning.
Scanning.
Yeah, using specialized tools. You might have heard of things like Nmap or Nessus.
Vaguely, yeah.
They probe the target systems to find open ports, running services, basically looking for potential entry points, like checking for unlocked doors and windows on a building.
Right, looking for an opening. And once they find one.
That leads to the next stage, gaining access. This is where the hacker tries to actually exploit those vulnerabilities they found.
Okay, the break-in part.
Uh-huh. And there are lots of techniques here. Things like SQL injection, which targets databases behind websites, trying to trick them into giving up info. Or maybe something called a buffer overflow, which is kind of like pouring too much water into a glass until it spills over and makes a mess. It can make a program crash or, worse, let the hacker take control.
That sounds pretty technical.
It definitely can be. Now, once they're in, the job isn't necessarily over. The next step might be maintaining access.
Sticking around?
Yeah, seeing if they can set up a persistent presence, maybe install a hidden backdoor, like a secret entrance, so they can get back in easily later without doing the original exploit again.
Right.
Or maybe install a rootkit to hide their presence.
So testing how deep they can really get embedded?
Exactly. But then, a really critical step, often overlooked by the bad guys but vital for ethical hackers, is covering tracks.
Cleaning up after themselves.
Precisely. Trying to remove evidence of their activity. Manipulating system logs those records of what happened on the system clearing event logs, making it look like they were never there. This tests the target's detection capabilities.
Okay.
And then, the absolute most important part, reporting.
Right. Because they're hired to help.
Exactly. The ethical hacker meticulously documents everything. Every step taken, every vulnerability found, how it was exploited, and most importantly, provides clear, actionable recommendations on how the organization can fix these weaknesses.
So the report is the real product, in a way?
It's the key deliverable. It's not just about finding problems. It's about delivering the solutions. That's the whole point.
That makes total sense. It's constructive. Okay, but given they're simulating illegal acts, what are the really hard lines, the legal and ethical boundaries they absolutely cannot cross?
This is probably the most critical aspect besides the technical skill. The legal and ethical boundaries are paramount.
Like rule number one?
Rule number 1, 0, -1, is you must have explicit written permission before you touch anything, period.
No ambiguity allowed.
None.
Yeah.
Without that signed contract, that documented scope of work, you're not an ethical hacker, you're just a hacker. And that's illegal. Plain and simple.
So a formal contract is completely non-negotiable.
Absolutely non-negotiable. And ethical hackers need to know the law too, like the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the CFAA in the U.S., and similar laws internationally. Breaking those laws has serious consequences, fines, jail time.
Are there professional codes of conduct as well, beyond just the law?
Oh, yes. Many reputable certifications, like the CEH Certified Ethical Hacker from EC Council, they have strict codes of ethics.
What do they generally cover?
Things like acting with integrity, maintaining strict confidentiality about what you find, professionalism, not exceeding the authorized scope, basically ensuring you use your skills responsibly and for good.
It sounds like even with permission, there's still a massive weight of responsibility.
Huge. Because even in an authorized test, things can sometimes go wrong. You might inadvertently cause disruption.
Mm.
That's why having a really clearly defined scope in the contract is vital. Exactly what systems are in scope, what's off limits, what techniques are allowed. It protects everyone involved.
So it's not just about technical chops, it's equally about ethics, law, and meticulous planning.
Precisely. You're wielding offensive techniques, but purely for defensive aims, and always, always within that strict legal and ethical framework.
This has been really, really insightful. It's so clear how essential ethical hackers are basically guardians of our digital spaces.
They really are proactive defenders against threats that are just constantly growing.
And it's fascinating to hear about the actual process, reconnaissance to reporting, and especially how critical those legal and ethical lines are.
Definitely. And I think understanding stuff, the basics of ethical hacking, it's becoming valuable for almost anyone now, whether you're just thinking about your own online safety or you're responsible for a business.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, here's something for you, our listener, to mull over. We know cyber threats are always evolving, getting more sophisticated. So what role do you think this kind of authorized, proactive breaking in really plays in keeping all of our digital lives safe and private? It really highlights that constant push and pull, doesn't it? That dance between offense and defense in cybersecurity.
A complex dance for sure.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
You know, in our digital world, it often feels like we're constantly hearing about cyber threats lurking around every corner. But what if I told you there's a force actively working to find those threats before the bad guys do? And they're doing it legally.
Right.
Okay, let's unpack this because this deep dive plunges us into the fascinating and frankly vital realm of ethical hacking.
Exactly. Our mission today is really to get a solid understanding of what ethical hacking actually entails, why it's become so crucial in today's landscape, and the methods these digital security experts use. We'll be drawing insights from discussions on CyberTalks
Okay.
to sort of dissect the definition, the essential difference from malicious hacking, the reasons behind its growing importance, the critical legal and ethical frameworks, and yeah, the common techniques they use in the field.
So ethical hacking. I mean, it almost sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? Breaking into systems,
Yeah.
but for good.
It does sound a bit strange at first, yeah. But what's really interesting is that the basic action trying to breach computer defenses, it's fundamentally the same whether the hacker is ethical or malicious.
Okay.
The crucial distinction, though, lies in the authorization and, critically, the intent. So ethical hacking is the practice of legally and with explicit permission trying to penetrate computer systems, networks, applications, even data.
And the goal is?
The goal, simple. Find security vulnerabilities. Find the weak spots.
Okay. So it's kind of like hiring a security consultant to, I don't know, try and pick the locks on your house to show you where you need stronger doors or windows.
That's a spot-on analogy, actually, yes.
Well, you've actually hired them to do it?
Exactly. The whole point is discovering those weak points before individuals with harmful intentions, the ones we often call black hat hackers, can find and exploit them.
Right, the bad guys.
Ethical hackers, often called white hats, are essentially cybersecurity specialists. They're contracted to rigorously test and enhance an organization's overall security. Their work is fully authorized.
Okay.
And it's all geared towards strengthening our digital foundations, whether that's for businesses, governments, you name it, any entity relying on digital infrastructure.
And what does that look like day to day? What are these white hats actually doing?
Well, their work involves several key things. A major one is penetration testing, pen testing, you'll hear it called.
Pen testing, right.
That's where they simulate real-world cyber attacks to see how resilient a system actually is. They also do vulnerability assessments. These are more like systematic evaluations to identify and categorize security weaknesses.
Okay, so less about breaking in, more about listing the problems.
Sort of, yeah. And then there's risk analysis, which helps organizations understand the potential impact if those vulnerabilities were exploited, the likelihood and the consequences. Imagine a pen tester trying to get into a company's network through a flaw in their website, just like a real attacker might try.
Okay, so the white hats are clearly the good guys here. But then you mentioned the black hats. It's more than just, style choices, right? What's the real difference?
Oh, absolutely. The core difference, like we said, it boils down to intent and legality.
Right.
White hat hackers have authorization. Their goal is improving security. Black hat hackers, on the other hand, operate illegally without any permission.
And their goal is?
Well, their objectives are usually malicious. Stealing sensitive information, maybe disrupting systems, causing damage, or very often making money illegally. Think ransomware, selling stolen data, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you hear about that all the time.
So think of it this way. A white hat gives you a report detailing the problems and how to fix them. A black hat just exploits the problem for their own gain.
Okay, clear difference. But then there's this other group I've heard about, the gray hats. They sound murky. Where do they fit in?
Ah, yes. This raises a really interesting point about, like, the spectrum of hacking activities. Gray hat hackers. Well, they're individuals who might hack without explicit permission. But they often claim their intentions aren't actually malicious. For example, maybe they find a vulnerability and then they tell the organization about it. Sometimes they even expect a reward or some recognition.
Kind of like a digital whistleblower, maybe.
Sort of, but here's the crucial part. In almost all legal systems, hacking without authorization is still illegal. Full stop. Regardless of the hacker's intent or what happens afterwards. So their actions exist in this kind of ethically gray area, definitely, but legally, they're often standing on the same side of the line as black hats.
Wow. Okay, so it sounds like a pretty bright line, legally speaking. Permission, ethical and legal. No permission, illegal. Even if you think you're helping.
That's the gist of it, yeah.
So with all this potential for harm out there from the black hats, why is ethical hacking so incredibly important right now?
Well, if you just think about how much we rely on digital systems for everything, the importance becomes crystal clear. It's really fundamental to proactive cybersecurity.
Proactive, meaning getting ahead of problems.
Yeah. Exactly. Instead of just reacting after a security breach happens, ethical hacking lets organizations find and fix weaknesses before the bad guys can use them. This preventative approach, well, it can save enormous amounts of time, money, and headache.
Yeah, that makes total sense. It's like getting a fire safety check instead of waiting for the fire.
Precisely. And there's more. Ethical hacking is also key for compliance.
Compliance, you mean like regulations and stuff?
Exactly. Think about healthcare, governed by HIPAA in the U.S. protecting patient data.
Right.
Or finance with PCI DSS for payment cards. And any organization handling personal data, especially in Europe under GDPR. These regulations often require regular security testing.
So ethical hacking helps them tick those boxes.
It provides the proof, yeah. It shows they're meeting those critical obligations.
And I bet avoiding a major cyber attack saves a ton of money, too. The fallout must be huge.
Oh, absolutely devastating. Preventing breaches directly saves massive costs. Think about potential fines, which can be enormous. Expensive legal battles, the cost of recovering data, fixing systems. And then there's the damage to a company's reputation, which can be, frankly, irreparable sometimes.
Yeah, trust is hard to win back.
Exactly. So investing in proactive security through ethical hacking, it's just a much smarter financial strategy in the long run. Plus, showing you take security seriously builds trust with customers, with partners. That's invaluable.
It really feels like the stakes just keep getting higher, doesn't it? Every time you see a headline about a data breach or ransomware.
You're absolutely right. The sophistication of attacks, the frequency, it's all increasing. Cybercrime is booming, sadly.
So the demand for these ethical hackers must be going up, too.
Through the roof. The demand for skilled ethical hackers has never been greater. In fact, industry projections point to a pretty serious shortage of cybersecurity professionals overall in the coming years.
I think I read something about that, like millions of unfilled jobs.
Yes, exactly. Cybersecurity Ventures estimated there'll be something like 3.5 million unfilled cybersecurity jobs globally by 2025.
Wow, 3.5 million.
Yeah. It really underscores how critical this field is, and it highlights that ethical hacking is a really vital and growing career path for people with the right skills and passion for security.
So for someone listening who might be interested in becoming one of these digital guardians,
Yeah.
it's clear they need to operate strictly within the law. What are the big legal and ethical things they have to keep in mind?
This is absolutely paramount. Legality and ethics are the absolute cornerstones of ethical hacking, non-negotiable.
Oh, yeah.
The single most important thing, getting explicit, formal, written permission before starting any testing at all.
Written permission. Got it.
Conducting any kind of security assessment without that clear authorization, even if you think you're doing good. It's illegal. Plain and simple. And it can lead to really severe legal trouble.
So definitely no vigilante stuff. even if you find a massive hole somewhere.
Absolutely not. And beyond permission, ethical hackers must be fully compliant with all the relevant laws. In the U.S., for example, there's the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the CFAA.
Yeah.
It sets clear legal boundaries about computer access. Similar laws exist pretty much everywhere. Violating them, that can mean criminal charges, even if the intent wasn't, malicious.
That sounds like a really serious line you absolutely cannot cross.
It is.
Okay.
And that's why sticking to strict ethical guidelines is just as crucial. Reputable certifications, like the CEH Certified Ethical Hacker from EC Council,
Uh-huh.
they have comprehensive codes of ethics. They emphasize integrity, confidentiality, professionalism. These codes act as a guide.
So it's about rules and principles.
Exactly. And finally, it's important to realize that even when everything is authorized, things can sometimes go wrong. Unintended consequences happen.
Like accidentally breaking something while testing.
Potentially, yes. If security testing inadvertently causes damage, the ethical hacker and maybe their employer could face legal liability. This just highlights why having really clear contracts is so important, defining exactly what's in scope, what's out of scope, and addressing potential risks.
Okay, so it's a field with a lot of responsibility, very regulated. Now, what about the actual methods? What are some of the common tools and techniques these ethical hackers use to find those weaknesses?
Right, they have quite a toolbox. They use a wide range of methods to simulate attacks and find those vulnerabilities. We mentioned penetration testing earlier, pen testing. That's fundamental.
Right.
It involves actively trying to exploit vulnerabilities they find to see if an attacker could actually get unauthorized access or cause harm. So maybe trying to use a known software bug to get admin rights on a server, for example.
And you mentioned there are different flavors of that, black box, white box.
Exactly, good memory. So black box testing. The testers start with zero knowledge of the target system, none at all. They approach it like an external attacker would.
Okay, from the outside looking in.
Precisely. They might start using tools like port scanners to map the network, find open services, just basic reconnaissance like a real attacker.
And white box.
Yeah. White box is the opposite. The testers get complete access to the system's internals, network diagrams, maybe even source code, configurations.
Wow, full access.
Yeah. This simulates more of an insider threat, someone who already has some knowledge or access. It allows for a really deep, thorough analysis. A white box tester might look directly at the application code for things like SQL injection flaws, ways to trick the database.
Okay, and gray box is somewhere in between.
You got it. Gray box is a hybrid. The testers have some partial knowledge, maybe some network info, maybe some basic user credentials, but not the full picture like in white box. This often mimics an attacker who's already gained some initial foothold or maybe has some limited insider help.
That makes a lot of sense. Testing from different angles, different levels of knowledge. What else is common?
Vulnerability assessments are another key technique. We touched on this too. These involve systematically identifying and categorizing weaknesses.
Right, the inventory of problems.
Exactly. Unlike pen testing, which is about exploiting flaws, vulnerability assessments aim to create a comprehensive list of potential issues and then rank them by risk. This helps organizations prioritize what to fix first. Often uses automated scanning tools to find known vulnerabilities or common misconfigurations.
Okay. And amidst all this tech, we can't forget the people involved, can we? I know social engineering is a big part of this, too.
Oh, absolutely critical. Social engineering is a huge area. Ethical hackers often test. These techniques focus on exploiting, us, human psychology, our natural tendencies to trust people or to want to be helpful or just, making mistakes. It targets people, not just machines.
So instead of hacking the computer, you're sort of hacking the person.
That's a good way to put it, yes. Phishing is a classic example, right? Deceptive emails crafted to look legitimate, trying to trick users into giving up passwords or clicking malicious links.
Yeah, I'll get those.
Imagine an email that looks exactly like it's from your bank, warns about suspicious activity, asks you to log in via their link, which of course leads to a fake site designed purely to steal your credentials.
Scary stuff.
Then there's pretexting. This involves creating a believable fake story or identity to gain someone's trust.
Like pretending to be someone else.
Exactly. Maybe calling an employee, pretending to be from IT support, convincing them they need their password right now to fix an urgent problem.
Wow.
And another one is baiting. offering something tempting. Maybe leaving a USB drive labeled confidential salaries or something lying around.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, someone picks it up, curiosity gets the better of them, they plug it into their work computer, and bam, it installs malware.
It's just amazing how many different ways attackers or ethical hackers simulating them can try to get in. It
Hmm.
really highlights why having these white hats working for us is so crucial.
It truly does. They are really on the front lines of this ongoing digital battle, constantly learning, adapting to new threats, and helping organizations shore up their defenses in a landscape that's just constantly changing.
So let's try and wrap this up.
Yeah.
We've learned that ethical hacking isn't some weird contradiction. It's actually a vital, authorized practice. You've got these skilled pros who proactively look for the holes in our digital walls.
Mhm.
By simulating the bad guys, they help organizations stay ahead, fix things before disaster strikes. And crucially, they do this all within strict legal and ethical rules, using a whole range of methods from deep technical dives like pen testing to understanding human psychology through social engineering
That's
tests.
a great summary, yeah. It really hits on the essential role these white knights, as you called them earlier, play in protecting our incredibly interconnected world.
Okay, so as we look to the future, this cat and mouse game between defenders and attackers isn't stopping, is it? And we rely more and more on digital systems for, well, everything. What do you see as the biggest ongoing challenges and maybe the most promising innovations we need in ethical hacking to make sure we can stay one step ahead? It definitely feels like that's a deep dive for another day, though.